Good morning. Glad you could join me again this Sunday morning. We ask that I want you to take a trip with me. And I got my driver's license out. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I'm going to ask you to supply most of the sermon today for you. Each of us will kind of write our own sermon as we go along. Most of us have this little small card called a driver's license, and we take it with us almost wherever we go. Sometimes it's for different kinds of identification, making sure that we are the person we say we are. And excuse me, let me share my selfie while you pull out your selfie. I want you to remember the day that you took your driver's test. I'll tell you my story. I was nervous. I read and reread the manual. I knew all the information. Most of it really is posted along the highways. I knew how to start and stop my car. I did have to practice a little bit extra on parking. And well, that day, an officer come out and joined me, and he suggested our route that we were going to take and drive. And so I observed the lights and the stop signs, and I signaled my turns, and I was nervous. But we returned to the station. He did not talk much during that time other than give directions. I was waiting to hear, hopefully, good news. The silence seemed deadening. As we entered the office, he passed some papers to the secretary, and he turned, and then he said some words I'll never forget. "You passed." Wow, what a feeling. And I thanked him graciously, and I waited for my license. I was reading some words this past week in my Bible, the red words, Jesus was supposed to have said, and Matthew wrote down quite a few of these parables and stories and incidents that Jesus shared. Anyway, in Matthew chapter 7, and if you want to look it up later, you can. Verse 13 and 14 made me stop and remember the selfie that I just shared. Life is a journey. And I read the road signs Jesus pointed out to his disciples. Jesus becomes that officer and made sure that we have a manual and that we understand that we have read it and follow through. I can imagine a little bit how the 12 disciples wondered if they could remember all the road signs that Jesus kind of pointed out to them about life. And his manual is a bit lengthy. We say the Bible, he had a lot of things to say to the people. And so he would say, follow me. I'll show you how, and point out the things. And so the disciples remembered a lot of them, and eventually they became written down, and we enjoy them today. Let me review a few things of the signs that we remember from our manual. When you pick this up, you remember all the things that you read about. You read the sign, there's curves ahead. There's a narrow bridge maybe ahead. There's a tunnel ahead, turn on your lights. There's a slow down there's a junction. And then there's the stop signs, of course, and the speed limit signs, and then red lights, and many more. So I paused and thought about every one of those signs. And I wondered if I could actually attach a spiritual message to each one of those signs. I thought I could, and I did write down quite a few. And so now that's my assignment to you while we're driving along here now today. You create your sermon from the selfie of when you went and took your driver's test and how you felt, nervous, and so on. Once in a while, I understand people have to go back the second time. Don't always get the answer that you want the first time. But anyway, take a pencil sometime and see if you can attach an event of life, of your life, with it, or an experience to some of those signs. I'll share one or two because Mom and Dad were pretty good at helping me remind me. Honor the stop signs. That seemed to be the biggest one. Like swearing, smoking, drinking, wrong and destructive beverages, for example. Of course, we had some people in the family, relatives, that kept running those stop signs, and we were well aware of that. And so we also were told, don't try to violate a red light. That's a dangerous thing. That's an intersection, and danger lurks there. So stop, think, and appreciate it, and then proceed if all is clear. And so this is what we have to do with the many choices we make. We have to stop and think. And are we making a good choice? And then proceed. Well, the message that's left by that parable allows us to make good choices, avoid many influences, challenges we face every day. Be careful. Now I want to add another thought to this parable. It's very positive. Jesus' followers, he said, about the narrow road in our scripture for the day. He said about entering the narrow road, and the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and many are those who enter by it. For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and few are those who find it. I wanted to call in this parable that there are some rest stops along that narrow road. In my thinking, let's say we understand what the narrow road is. Jesus told us it's the choices we make to follow God's road of love and faith and patience and prayer and others. And so I began to think about it. That's a holy avenue. That's a deal that I gave. And then I had some other thoughts. The Church of the Brethren is an avenue. The Baptist. These are stations where you can turn out, pause on this highway, and look around and see the sights from the different points of view. And so you move, there's the Methodist and the Catholic, and there's Presbyterian, and there's Friends, Mennonite, Amish. Isn't that something? And the sights are amazing. And I'm convinced they're using the same road signs that Jesus posted. Signs of caution and danger. You'll find them as you get out and look at the sights and travel that narrow road of life. They encourage us to respect the same signs. So we enjoy the narrow highway and stop at the different lookout points. Now, I'm going to admit it's handy sometimes to drive on Broadway. And it's tempting. After all, it's the view of where we live. It even feels good to drive on Broadway at times. However, Don't forget it's a dangerous highway. I've missed my exit several times, and I've been caught in traffic accidents that caused us to sit for hours at one spot until the road opened. And so often this involves many cars and many lives. And so I want to repeat, like the broad ways and the narrow ways of life are very identical to the choices we make on the road that Jesus has put in front of us to follow. And this is where, along that road, the narrow road, where we really live. It's here where we work. It's where you raise your family. And it's where you build life relationships with other folks. And so let Jesus be the officer that comes in and tells you this is the direction, let's take this road and travel God's highway. I want you to read the manual. I want you to read the stories of others that have written great stories of their travels on this special highway, the narrow and straight road. I read a lot of stories that are in guideposts. I read stories that are in Reader's Digest and the Boise Rescue Mission Journal and personal testimonies. There's a lot of information. Life goes on. And I want to close by reading again from Matthew 7. And this time I want to read what Matthew, some of the things he gathered and put right after he said those other words. So I'm going to read it once again to us from Matthew. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, the way is broad, and leads to destruction. Many are those who enter by it. For the gate is small, the way is narrow, that leads to life, and few are those who find it. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. But you will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from thorns, nor figs from thistles. So every good tree bears good fruit, and the bad tree bears bad fruit. And so every tree that does not bear good fruit many times is cut down, thrown into the fire. So you will know them by your fruits. And so I'm going to let you continue to read and think about those words. And that's your sermon that you are giving through your experience of getting a driver's license. Thank you, and thank you. We'll see you next week.